Getting into PvM is a long journey, and the adventure of learning all the bosses along the way and upgrading your gear is a hell of a fun one. That being said, it can also be a frustrating one if you don't know where to start. So what I'm going to do in this video is go through an absolute beginner PvM guide, and what we're going to do is tell you which bosses are going to be great to start at, quickly cover all the mechanics for those bosses, and I mean quickly, rapid fire cover those bosses so you can go in without having to think about it too much, and give you a direction of where to start and where to end up before you move into something like mid-level, which we could do in another video should you guys find this video useful. Starting at the wrong bosses and trying to start too high up the ladder and then not knowing what to do as well can absolutely put you off PvM, and then there's the last thing that you want to do. So we're going to get into this quickly. This is the intro finished. We're going to move into a gear setup and recommended gear for all combat styles, all three. I'll give an example on screen, and that gear will be fine for all of these bosses I'm going to talk about today. If the video helps, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's get into this. Okay, so starting off with the gear choices and things I would recommend you have before you get into this. Keep in mind you can downgrade these, as you will still be able to get through most of the earlier bosses absolutely fine, and then of course as you move further up the ladder it's going to get more difficult. So the better things you have, the better off you're going to be, and if you have better than this, then absolutely great. Most of the things I mention here are not going to be too difficult to obtain, so it is absolutely worth getting this stuff before you get into it, and there's a few levels that are going to be important to get as well. So let's start off with the actual gear. Is going to be tier 70 God Wars 1 armor, which is subjugation, bandos armor, or armadillo armor. Then I would recommend having the tier 85 weapons of that combat style. You could absolutely start out on the lower end of this list without these and start working your way up. However, when you do get the money for it, I would recommend upgrading your weapons first and getting tier 85s. These give great accuracy and they will carry you through all these bosses nice and easy. These can be quite expensive, but of course there is going to be some other things in here as well, including levels for overloads and stuff that are going to be expensive to get to, so you will have to do some previous money making to actually get yourself ready to go into PvM in a good position. So getting access to these shouldn't be too difficult to get to, and they absolutely will be a good starting point for most PvMers. Next, I would recommend having at least a tier 70 plus shield or defender. This is incredibly important because you need to have a shield for a lot of these bosses mentioned, and it is important to get used to your defense abilities nice and early. As for an amulet slot, you could probably get away with just having an amulet of fury or a glory even, but if you do have something like an amulet of souls, bring this along. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so good for the soul split heals, and it will make it so much easier for you. Amulet of souls is pretty expensive though, so I wouldn't expect a ton of people to have this at this point, but that's fine. Finally, you are going to want to have overloads unlocked if you can. Overloads are going to be amazing and probably very important to get through a lot of the later bosses in this list. And then finally, level 95 prayer and ancient curses being unlocked will be incredibly useful as well. Of course, you can do these bosses, especially early on, without these, and you can just buy the tradable potions, the grand potions on the grand exchange. These will give you a decent boost as well, but of course having these will make your life a lot easier. If you don't have these unlocked, I would make these two things your very first focus on upgrades and unlocking things as you go into PvM. Other than that, guys, anything you can upgrade would be amazing, of course, and if you are downgrading something, then try not to go too far away from this, as it is going to make your life a little bit more difficult, even though it is absolutely possible earlier on. Okay, so PvM in this game can be quite confusing. There's a lot of mechanics, there's a lot of stuff you need to do at certain timings, and the game does actually quite a good job of teaching you this as long as you follow the correct path of progression through PvM. So that's where we're going to start. The best place to start is definitely going to be God Wars Dungeon 1. God Wars Dungeon 1 doesn't have too many requirements to get into. If you need to find this out, I will link it in the description for you to go and follow the God Wars Dungeon requirements if you need to get those unlocked. Once you are ready to get into God Wars Dungeon 1, we are going to tie this as our first boss all together because it is nice and easy to actually beat all of these bosses. There's a couple of things to mention about individual ones, but otherwise you will just go with the correct combat style or the best combat style and just do as much damage as you can while pretty much praying the correct prayer. The way we're going to handle this is I want to keep the boss guides pretty damn quick. It's going to be, I'm going to show you the combat styles that are viable on screen, I'm going to show you the boss, I'm going to mention very quickly the things that you need to pay attention to, what you should be using for protection prayers, and also put an example of an inventory screen on the actual screen for you as well, so you can copy that and you know exactly what you're taking and what is recommended. So what are you waiting for? Let's get started with God Wars Dungeon 1, which is going to be your first steps into becoming a PvMer. God Wars Dungeon 1 really doesn't take that much to get into. It's not going to be much of a learning curve. All it's going to be is learning your DPS rotations while using the correct prayer in most situations. There's one difference to actually mention, which is going to be at the Kirill boss, as you can see on the right hand side, marked out in red, but we'll talk about that very soon. So most of these bosses are just going to require you to use the correct combat style and pray the correct prayers to reduce the damage that you do take. Of course, Soul Split will work at all of these bosses as well, again, except for Kirill. So on screen, you can see that each boss has his name and then the actual boss that it is, and then you can also see in white text beside them the requirements that you need to actually fight the bosses. These are just the requirements to unlock the room and not the actual recommended stats. I would probably recommend just having 85 in the combat style that you want to use, so you can use those tier 85 weapons. However, these are the bosses you can kill without those tier 85s. I would still recommend having those combat stats to be able to actually have a pretty decent advantage when killing them. So with that being said, above the text that shows the entrance requirement, you will see the combat styles that work pretty damn well at these bosses. And then below that, below the text, you'll notice that there is a prayer and the soul split icon. The prayer is the prayer that you will be using protect from. So at Grado, you will use protect from melee. At Ziliana, you will use protect from magic. And at Kriara, you will use protect from range. At Krill, you do not want to use any prayers at all. In fact, when you enter the zone to go into Krill, you will lose all of your prayer points. You can use a prayer potion to restore your points before you go in while you're getting the kill count, but when you go into the fight, you don't want to have any prayer points, and this is because he has a special attack that he will deal damage to you based on your current prayer points. So when you go into this fight, you are better off using a vampirism aura and not having any prayer points. This is so that when he does do his special attack, it doesn't absolutely slaughter you, and you don't have to sit there munching on food all the way through the kill and probably dying a couple of times. Other than that, it's pretty much, it is what it is. You want to stand in the corner of the room at Kriara. The rest of it is just attack the boss, pray the correct thing, and do as much damage as possible. These bosses will teach you a lot about doing DPS, so stay here until you're comfortable with killing them fast enough, and then you can move on to the next boss, which is going to be the Queen Black Dragon. Next up is the Queen Black Dragon. This is going to need 60 summoning to be able to enter this fight, and that is all the requirements you will need. I would still recommend having the same stuff as mentioned before, as it's going to make this fight pretty easy for you. However, you could probably downgrade to like tier 80 weapons if you absolutely needed to, but this is the last boss where I would recommend that you do this. One last thing that I would suggest you do have is going to be super anti-fire potions. You can get these by making them at level 85 Herblore, and they are going to be incredibly useful, as it means you will not need to use an anti-dragon shield here, meaning you can just do way more damage and get through the fight a lot quicker. You can boost by using pulse cores to get this at level 78 Herblore if you don't have access to 85. In comparison to the God Wars 1 bosses, the Queen Black Dragon is a fair step up in difficulty. This is because she has quite a few mechanics that you will need to pay attention to and can get you killed if you don't deal with them properly. But don't panic, these aren't too difficult and they are a great step in teaching you along the way towards your next bosses. There are 5 mechanics you will need to pay attention to, so let's talk about those now. Throughout the fight, if you don't have Soul Split, you will be using protection from range, and I would recommend killing this boss with either range or magic as well, as it does make it quite more convenient, but you can use melee if that is the gear that you do have. To progress through the fight at QBD, you will have to get her health bar down to 0 each time, and this will take you into a new phase. As soon as you get her health down to 0, you will notice a statue in the arena glow. You need to click this, and as soon as you do, as soon as it is activated, her health will go back to full, and you will have to start again and get her health down to empty again before activating the next crystal. You will see on screen now in which order those crystals are activated, and you can go to those in order as you do phase. Throughout the phases, there will be 5 different mechanics that you need to keep your eye out for and continuously deal with. The first one is the firewall. The Queen Black Dragon will make a wall of fire go towards you, and the easiest way to deal with this is to simply run directly through it, which if timed correctly can reduce the damage down to 0, as it will not trigger on you, but should it actually hit you, you will only take damage on 1 tick as long as you are running towards the Queen Black Dragon when you go through it. Further you get into the fight, the more waves of firewalls there's going to be when she does this special attack, so what you will have to back up and then move back through the next wave when this does happen. If you have a super anti-fire potion, don't worry about this, it won't hurt too much, but if you don't, this will count as Dragonfire, so this will hurt a lot unless you are wearing a Dragonfire shield and have drunk a Dragonfire potion. The second mechanic is called Tortured Souls. The Queen Black Dragon will summon Tortured Souls between 1 and 4 at your player's location. You can dodge their attack that they put on the ground directly after spawning by walking through them. As soon as they spawn, if you step through them to the other side, their smoke that they put on the ground will go back and damage themselves. This way you don't take the damage from it, and you do also kill the Tortured Soul as well. At some point you are going to get 4 that go around you in diagonal corners. The best way to deal with this is to just walk diagonally through one of those once they've done their attack, and that way it will all pile onto that one, as you can see me doing on screen now. Sometimes this can be a bit dodgy, so you just want to make sure when this happens that you are on high health, because if you do make a mistake, you just want to be able to eat up and carry on with the fight. Next up is the Extreme Dragon Breath. Queen Black Dragon will do a big fire breath down the middle of the arena, which is quite self-explanatory. You will notice it straight away, and this does more damage the closer you are to the center of the arena. So when this happens, you want to be stood on the side of the arena, and you just want to make sure you do have your super anti-fire on you, otherwise you will take a lot of damage, and this will probably kill you if you don't have this on. You can use a defensive like Reflect or Debilitate on this, however I would suggest just eating up and continuing to do DPS. Finally is the time stop mechanic. This is going to be a tortured soul at the edge of the arena, and he is going to be talking above his head. You need to kill him as quick as possible, because if you don't and he finishes the chant that he is doing, your whole arena will be frozen except for the mechanics happening. Your character will be frozen in time, but the damage will still be applied, meaning when the time does run out, your character is going to take all the damage that you would have taken in that time in one hit. So you cannot eat through this, and it will likely kill you. If she does the dragon breath, if she does any firewalls or anything, you're going to take all the damage for that in one tick, and there's nothing you can do about it. But don't worry, the tortured souls have very little health, so just keep an eye out for them and kill it as soon as possible. Finally, throughout the fight, the Queen Black Dragon will change from the normal color when you start the fight to either blue or green. When she turns to blue, she is more vulnerable to physical damage, which means range and melee hits will hit harder. When she changes to green, she is weaker to magic damage. However, when she is blue, she will take less damage from magic, and when she is green, she will take less damage from melee and range. This can be a little bit annoying sometimes if she changes to the wrong color, but then at the same time, when she changes to the right color, you deal a lot more damage, and it makes the kill quicker. This boss is going to teach you positioning, it's going to teach you phasing, and it's going to teach you to do a lot more damage and pay attention to things that are going on in your surroundings. It's going to prepare you for getting used to things happening ahead of time, for example the firewalls, and moving out of the way quickly when the tortured souls do spawn. Once you've gone through all the phases and you've activated the last statue, you will go down into the Queen Black Dragon's loot room, and that will be the end of the kill. I would suggest staying here until you find this boss quite comfortable as well, meaning your damage has gone up a fair amount from God Wars Dungeon 1, and you've got used to the mechanics and you don't find them too difficult, as these will definitely carry over to future bosses and make the next step quite a bit easier. The next boss we are going to be moving to is in God Wars Dungeon 2, and it's going to be Vindicta. Vindicta is going to teach you a lot of mechanics, and it's going to start you off using your defensive abilities on the regular. It's going to start you off with just using about 2 defensive abilities, but it is going to be important as you will use these for pretty much the rest of your PvM career. To enter Vindicta, you will need to have 80 attack, and you also need to get a 40 kill count, just like at God Wars Dungeon 1. However, at God Wars Dungeon 2, your kill count does save when you leave the arena, so don't panic. You can get the kill count and you can bank. It is not a pain like God Wars Dungeon 1. Also, I should probably mention that Vindicta is probably going to be the first boss where you can have the chance at making a lot of money, as he does have a couple of drops that are worth around about 50 mil each. So if you get lucky, you can make a lot of money very quickly and get some upgrades that will help you out a hell of a lot on your next progression steps. From here on out, I would recommend that you do have the tier 85 weapons. While you can probably get away with it at level 80, I would still recommend having the tier 85s, as it's going to make a big difference on accuracy. Once you enter the Vindicta fight, you are going to want to be protecting from melee or using soul split if your damage is high enough. While getting used to the boss, I would probably recommend using protect from melee anyway. This fight is going to introduce you to a few new mechanics that you're not used to, one being prayer flicking from melee to range every now and again, and the other being a few mechanics that I will talk about as we get to them. So, for the beginning of the fight, he's just going to attack you with melee attacks, so if you have protect from melee on, you'll be absolutely fine. First thing you need to pay attention for is when the dragon flies overhead and drops a smoke line on the floor. As soon as this happens, you will see big purple smokes coming from the ground. Move out of this and just step to the side of it, and that way you won't take the magic hits that are going to be rapidly hitting you if you are stood inside of it. This is just about positioning, that is all it is. Just get out of the way of it and you'll be absolutely fine. This is going to be the only mechanic until Vindicta gets on the dragon. Once on the dragon, Vindicta will attack you with melee, then range, and then melee, and then fly away. This is important to know because the range hit is where you are going to want to prayer flick or use a defensive ability to deal with it. The range hit will hit you hard, but it is a great way to reduce the amount of food you need to use in this fight, as you can use resonance to heal from this. So once Vindicta gets on the dragon, they will walk towards you and hit you with melee. As long as you have protect from melee on, you'll be absolutely fine. Once they have done this, the next attack will be a ranged hit. You want to either change to protect from range and use something like devotion from your defense abilities, or ideally you want to change to a shield and use resonance when the range hit is about to attack you. This means you will heal from the range hit instead of actually taking any damage from it, and if you don't have the range prayer on, you will heal a lot more than if you did. After the ranged hit, Vindicta will hit you with one more melee hit and then fly away. Once flown away, you will get another trail of smoke towards you. You will just have to get out of this. Using surge or bladed dive, if you have access to it, is going to be the best way to deal with this. Once the smoke is done, they're going to come back to you and hit you once again with melee, range, and melee, and then fly away. This is going to repeat for the rest of the fight, and that is all you have to deal with. Now, it sounds pretty simple, but that ranged hit is going to be a lot of damage. So what you want to do is every second hit that they do with a ranged hit, you can use resonance to heal from this. And then every other hit, you can use devotion. This means you will be doing on the first one, melee, resonance, melee, and then fly away. And then melee, change to protect from range, use devotion, and then change back to protect from melee, and then he's going to fly away. And then you come back and you'll use resonance on the range hit on this one, and then rinse and repeat. That is all there is to this fight. It sounds a lot easier than it is. It's going to take a bit of practice to begin with. Trust me, you will eat quite a bit of food while learning this fight, but once you've got that resonance down, you'll be able to get through this fight without using much food whatsoever, meaning you can get through this nice and easy without too much costs, and you can end up making a decent amount of money here. This boss is going to be great for teaching you to use defensives, meaning resonance and devotion. You can use debilitate as well if you need that, as that will reduce the damage you do take from the range hit as well. Overall, from this boss, you will learn to use defensives, use positioning, increase your DPS once again. You will start working on a rotation to understand when you can use defensives off cooldown, as you will need to get in the habit of timing your resonance for every second range hit. This is a valuable fight, and it's going to be important in the next boss, so once you are comfortable with this boss and you find it not too difficult, it is time to move to Helwyr. One last thing that I should quickly mention, to be honest, and should have mentioned earlier, is if you're using range or magic here, which you can use any combat style, just make sure you stay in melee distance, otherwise you will be continuously hit by range hits, and you don't want to do that. Next up is Helwyr, and you are going to be using the same sort of strategies that you use at Vindicta to get through this fight, but the mechanics are a little bit more complex and you will be punished a little bit more for messing them up. That is good though, because you are moving up your ladder in PvM, and it is going to teach you a lot of valuable lessons to work your way up to the next boss. It is worth mentioning that Helwyr will need 80 magic to be able to fight this boss, and once again you will need a kill count of 40 on Seren monsters. Again, I would recommend having tier 85 weapons plus, however you could probably scrape through with tier 80. Helwyr has 4 mechanics we need to talk about, but also there's going to be some more prayer flicking throughout the fight, but I would recommend as well, even if you do have soul split, that you do use protect from melee here and you use resonance to heal up when we get to that point. You can kind of see with Helwyr where everything starts tying together in PvM and how every boss so far is relevant on teaching the next step. Queen Black Dragon had positioning with the firewalls and the extreme flames and stuff, and being aware of things happening very quickly. Vindicta taught you to use your defensives like resonance, and Helwyr is going to need you to use that resonance and make sure your positioning is spot on as well. Helwyr will also add a few of his own things that you need to pay attention to, which will apply to the next boss, so it all adds together and it does help you get your way there nice and steady. Okay, so when you start this fight, you'll want to pray protect from melee, and as you enter the room, Helwyr is going to spawn in the middle. One thing to note is you don't want to be running around the room with Helwyr attacking you, because as you pull Helwyr around, he will skip auto attacks, meaning he will use his abilities a lot quicker. So you want to just basically let him hit you while you stand still. This way you can have the time you need between his special attacks to do damage, and then you can deal with the special attacks and go back to doing DPS. Great news, you don't have to change from the melee prayer to any other prayer styles during this, apart from disabling it when you need to use resonance. Everything in this arena is going to hit you with melee, so that does reduce something that you need to pay attention to. The first mechanic that you're going to get is called the Aid of Nature. This is going to put down some mushrooms on the ground with an acid cloud around them. You don't want to be in this circle. It is pretty obvious, it looks deadly. If this does spawn on top of you, just surge out of it or get out of it as quick as you can. Should you get stuck inside it, you want to use the defense ability Freedom to break free of the stun and move out of it. If you are inside this cloud, you will take magic damage and you will be slowed, so you can only walk. The damage isn't huge, but you do want to get out of it as soon as possible. If it does spawn on you, you can use Surge to get away from it, but you will want to have Surge soon for one of the next mechanics, as it is incredibly useful for that one. Okay, so once you've dealt with this mechanic and you're out of the way, you need to be ready for Helwyr to use something called You Will Bleed. You will notice Helwyr go on his back legs and say You Will Bleed. He will do a big melee hit at this point, which is when you can use resonance to heal up. This mechanic alone can make Helwyr absolutely foodless, or it can reduce the amount of food you need to use by a hell of a lot. As someone who is learning the fight for the first few times, don't feel like you need to use resonance on this straight away. You can come back to learn this once you've got a bit more comfortable with the fight, but what you can do with this is make sure you have protect from melee on and just tank it. Or, once you're more comfortable, change to a shield when you know this is about to happen, which will be just after you see the actual Aid of Nature ability before this. Then as he uses this attack, you want to turn your melee prayer off and use resonance just as he's about to hit you. Later on in the fight, you are going to have wolves attacking you as well, so timing this correctly is important if you haven't killed all the wolves. The timing for this is just as he is about to come down with the attack, use resonance then, and you will always resonance his hit and none of the wolves' hits. Another option, of course, would be to use Devotion while using Protect from melee, which would reduce the hit down to 1. After this mechanic, he is going to use the Thrash mechanic, which is where he will jump towards your location and attack you very quickly. All of these hits are melee, and what I will suggest you do here is surge away immediately in a direction that he is not, and also making sure you don't land in one of the acid smoke clouds. This will put you out of range of his melee attacks, and you can use Freedom immediately, as this does apply a bleed to you. You want to use Freedom once you've surged to remove that bleed, as it will stack and it will do a lot of damage over time, causing you to use more food than you need to. After using the Thrash mechanic, he is going to summon 2 alpha wolves that are going to attack you. You can ignore these if you are more comfortable with the fight, Otherwise, if you think they are doing too much damage to you, then feel free to kill them off. Once you've got down the timing on the resonance from the You Will Bleed attack, you kind of just find these wolves to be more of a pain in the ass than they are of a worry, because the main reason they are there, in my opinion, is to stop you from just being able to resonance that attack quite comfortably. However, if you do time it correctly, like I say, just as his attack is about to come down, you will always resonance his hit, meaning you can just ignore the wolves as he's only going to spawn them the next time he goes around this cycle. They don't deal a hell of a lot of damage, and of course using devotion every now and again is going to reduce that hit down to 1 anyway. An ideal way to deal with them though would be to use AoE attacks on Helwyr, and that way the wolves that are around you in melee distance will also take damage and eventually get killed off by this too. Once the wolves have been spawned, a couple of hits later, he will do the Aid of Nature again, then go back to the You Will Bleed, back to Thrash, and then back to summoning more wolves. This will just rotate round until the fight is over. Helwyr is pretty decent money. He has a couple of drops that are over 20 mil each, being the Swear Wand and the Swear Orb of the Elders. However, he is also pretty consistent money on herbs and other drops as well, meaning it's a good boss to learn for making a good amount of money at a low level. So overall, this boss fight is going to teach you on more using your defensives, of course using your DPS while dealing with mechanics as well. You will ideally want to drop Sunshine, Death Swiftness and Berserks in this fight sometime when you're more comfortable with it to increase the DPS you can deal and get yourself through the kill a lot quicker. It teaches you to use more defensives at better timings, and it also teaches you timings on that resonance ability to make sure you only res that final hit, the big hit, the one that you want to heal from. It does all of this while making sure your positioning is spot on, because it is going to be randomly spawning the mushrooms around the room as well. There's a lot to think about, and this fight does progress through the special attacks very quickly. So Helwyr will be putting you under pressure, it will be testing your reaction times, and you will be having to pick up the pace a little bit, but this is all going to be important for later on. Okay, you're doing pretty well so far. You've beat Helwyr, you're comfortable with that boss. It's time to move on to the Arc Glacor. The Arc Glacor in normal mode is a great boss to get to for learning PvM, as it lets you toggle abilities on and off, learn the mechanics individually, and it's going to help you progress into such higher level bosses in such a good way. You could come to the Arc Glacor sooner than doing the other God Wars 2 bosses if you wanted to. This way you can turn off the mechanics and maybe go in with 1, 2 or 3 mechanics, and then that way you can build your way up slowly. However, I would recommend learning the other ones, as it does teach you quite a bit, and if you do come here first, then I would recommend going back to those anyway. Don't skip them, because they do teach you individual things, and it's going to be important to pick those up before you try harder bosses that are going to punish you so much more than they do when you don't do the same sort of mechanics and deal with them in the ways that they teach you to. For the Arc Glacor in normal mode, I would recommend again using the tier 85 weapons plus, but again, you could probably get away with using tier 80. I just would recommend using tier 85 to make your life a bit easier, especially while learning. There are no solid requirements to actually getting into this fight. You can start it at whatever you want. However, I would still recommend having at least level 85 in the combat style you want, and of course, like I said, those weapons. As mentioned, you can toggle on and off the mechanics that you want to deal with in normal mode, but for this we are going to be going through a full mechanic kill, meaning there's 5 mechanics to cover. Throughout this fight, your protection prayers you want to have on Protect from Magic. If you do have Soul Split, you can use that instead if you wanted to, but if you are finding that you're not doing enough damage to heal back the damage you are taking, then just use Protect from Magic, you'll be fine doing that. The Arc Glacor's normal basic attacks will be with magic, but there is a mechanic called Flurry, and this will allow him to change his combat style between range and magic while this mechanic is happening. So you will be needing to do some prayer flicking here. The mechanics for the attacks do look pretty similar, except the range one will have a green smoke at the end of the tip of his arm, which is going to indicate that it is a ranged hit. Okay, so one thing to mention before we fully get into the mechanics is there is something in this fight called Creeping Ice. On either side of the arena, you're going to get icicles coming in at varying distances depending on what mechanic you're about to get. Mechanics at the Arc Glacor are chosen at random, except you can see what is about to happen at the time of it happening due to where the icicles are placed in your character. For example, if you are getting the Flurry mechanic, the icicles will be spread out quite a bit and you will have a fair decent amount of room. For a mechanic called the Frost Cannon, the area will be very narrow and your character won't be able to move very far, but you can use this as a bit of a warning that this mechanic is about to happen so you can get your stuff ready. I will show you what it looks like on screen for each mechanic so you can see what the ice looks like then as well as we talk about those mechanics. Okay, we're going to start off with the Flurry mechanic. Like I said before, there's going to be 2 different attacks and you can notice the difference between a green smoke or a blue smoke on his arms when he attacks you. To deal with this, like I say, you just need to protect the right combat style, so when it is green, protect from range, and when it is blue, protect from magic, and that's all you need to do for this while dealing DPS. The next mechanic is going to be called Glaciate Minions. What's going to happen is the Arc Glacor will put a shield up in front of him and summon 4 Glaciate Minions. You need to kill these minions before you can continue dealing damage to the Arc Glacor, so kill them as quick as possible. If you're using range, it's worth bringing Chinchompers to kill these down. If you're using magic, Detonate is great, and I wouldn't really recommend using melee here. However, if you are going to, then use any AoE ability to clear these Glaciate Minions and then get back on the boss. Once the minions are dead, you can continue dealing damage to the Arc Glacor as it will no longer be blocked, and then you'll need to get ready for the next mechanic. The next mechanic that can be chosen is called Pillars of Ice. What's going to happen here is the creeping ice is going to push you all the way to the right hand side of the arena, and then 2 pillars of ice are going to spawn that travel down the bridge. You want to stay away from these pillars of ice, making sure that they don't touch you, as they are going to reduce your adrenaline and deal damage to you at the same time. This is typeless damage and cannot be reduced, so you want to make sure you dodge these. However, if everything is going terribly and you are going to die to this, you can use barricade if you need to. The pillars move pretty slow, so using surge and moving around them on the other side of the bridge isn't too difficult, and it will definitely get easier with practice. Next up is the exposed core. The Arc Glacor is going to push you to the center of the arena, but make the arena not look too narrow. He's going to place his arms down on the arena, and your character is going to be trapped in. You can attack either one of the arms on the right or the left hand side, it doesn't matter. You want to kill this as quick as possible while protecting from magic, as you are going to be taking magic damage until you kill this arm and get out of the way. Your goal is to DPS one of the arms down until it breaks, and then move your way out of the middle of the arena off to the side so you stop taking the magic damage. Once you've done that, just get back on the boss and continue doing DPS once he is attackable. The final mechanic is the frost cannon that we mentioned earlier. The creeping ice is going to push you into a very narrow area, and he is going to charge up a big one-hit massive damage attack. If not dealt with properly, this will kill you. But don't worry, dealing with it is pretty easy. As soon as you notice this mechanic is happening, ideally you can put on a shield and get ready to use resonance when it does hit you. If you don't protect from magic with this, you will get a full heal no matter what. I'm not 100% sure if you still get a full heal when protected from magic, but you absolutely might do. If resonance is not available for some reason, you can use devotion, or you can use debilitate and reflect to reduce the damage from this. Ideally though, you want to use devotion or resonance on this, and that way you either get a heal or you reduce the damage down to 0. Keep in mind, if you are using devotion, this attack hits with magic, so pray protect from magic. Other than those mechanics, it's just going to repeat the fight at random, throwing the mechanics at you. They can come back to back, they can come at random, you may not see one of them if you're quick enough. All you need to worry about now is doing DPS to the boss and getting this kill over with. This boss can drop a lot of good stuff. The Book of Wen is incredibly expensive, and you can get Nihilus and stuff, which is going to help you out for hard mode if you do decide to work on that at some point. This boss isn't too difficult, the mechanics aren't overly punishing. I believe they made this boss for you to practice, and if you are struggling with a single mechanic, I would suggest coming out of the fight and putting only the mechanic on that you are struggling with and getting used to them one at a time and working away that way. Once you're used to the one mechanic and you can recognize it nice and easy, you can add in a second one and build your way up. Don't feel like you have to come in here and do all the mechanics in one go. Do them one at a time, get comfortable with it, add another one, and work your way up the ladder. This boss is going to teach you to do prayer flicking, is going to teach you to do DPS while dealing with other stuff. It's going to be the first fight where you absolutely have to kill the summons that are given to you, and it is going to make you pay attention to what's going on in the arena a lot more than other bosses, as it is going to be your indicator for what mechanic is about to happen. You're going to have to use more defensives, and of course, again, your DPS is just going to have to increase to get through this fight quickly and smoothly. All of this will happen over time, and I have faith that you guys will get there and find this boss easy eventually. Alright, so that covers all of the bosses that I'm going to include in this video. Once you've got through all those bosses, you've learned quite a bit, and you're well on your way to working on some higher level bosses as well. Not higher level bosses, just higher level than what you are here. Your next step would probably be things like the Kalphite King in a duo or a trio, next in a duo as well, and then from there on you can go to a Raxor and try that out and learn the mechanics there. Of course, you're going to want to get upgrades in your gear as soon as you can. But honestly, the tier 85 weapons are pretty damn good and will probably get you through all of those bosses that I did mention with a little bit of help and a bit of practice. Anyway guys, I'm not going to drag this outro on because the video is already long enough. I hope it did help you out. If it did, let me know in the comments. I'm interested in finding out if this sort of video did help people out and if it was interesting enough and useful with the guides that were very, very quick fire. If it did help, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, share this with any people that you think could benefit from it, of course, as it can be pretty helpful for a lot of people. Also, I will link any boss guides that I do have to the bosses mentioned in this in the description below. Otherwise, thank you so much to the channel members for your extra support. Your names will have been on the screen at some point through this outro. I very much appreciate the extra support. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope it helped. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye.